Much I join in
the tide of attrition in our agency, which will hopefully alleviate some of that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair now recognizes Mr. Sessions from Texas.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I join in the calls of all of our members to say thank you for doing this hearing on a bipartisan basis. Director, I'm not going to sit here and say you ought to resign, but I am going to say that you have not given us confidence that you have the ability to understand what happened, to take the responsibility in terms of understanding. You've spent a number of years. How many years do you say you've been with the agency?
29.
Well, I spent 16 years with AT&T, moved 7 times with them, and had a really good feel about their operations, how they worked, what was acceptable, who was responsible. And I've heard you say today numbers of times, well, you've got to wait. Well, you've got to wait. Wait for the final report. When is the final going to happen? I mean, how long do we have to wait before you can give us credible answers? You've been there 28 years. You've had a few days to be able to draw your own analysis of this. You should understand the entire process. You talked about being on the team, perhaps in Georgia. You have talked about your experience in this. You've talked about the professional nature of the agency. That I don't doubt. But the director, just like it was when I ran my operations at AT&T, was responsible for making sure they worked. And in business, either works or it doesn't work. There's no in between. It either works or it does not work. And your job as the, in essence, administrator, the director, is to make sure it looks right and works. And I've not heard you say one thing about my analysis is, I have asked these questions. It's always, I've got to sit back and wait for someone else to decide that. So I'm going to ask you a question that maybe you can answer. Have any employees been disciplined for their role in Butler, PA incident?
No, sir, not at this time. I am asking those questions.
So no employee has been disciplined and no employee has been placed in any position that would place their job in jeopardy nor their standing in the agency.
We are still in the process of
That's
interviewing
not what I
people.
asked. You're the person that runs the place. You're the person that knows right from wrong, good from bad. You've had a number of days and now you come before this committee knowing you're going to be before us and you've got to slough it off to someone else. Do you see where there was something that went wrong as a professional at an agency for 28 years, or do you have to count on someone else to give you the final report?
I see that something went wrong, and I've acknowledged that something went
Then
wrong.
what went wrong?
I
Was
need
the
to-
special agent in charge not doing their job? Was the shooter was the shooter given extra time? Was the sniper doing their job? I mean, these are things that people who've been around for 28 years can analyze quickly. I watched it live on TV. And then within minutes saw a number of facts and factors that would have and should have been known by people who were there. You've got 28 years. You're showing up here telling us and the American public, well, I've got to wait for the final answer. What is your evaluation?
I'm asking those same questions.
Well, no, you're before the
And I
committee. Tell us what went wrong. A special agent in charge, the person who was there. Tell us and don't try and play a shell game with us. Do you have the ability to effectively, as the director of this agency, to understand what went wrong and at least tell us, I do or don't know what I'm doing? And we come away with, and I'm not asking for you to resign. I'm asking for you, if you've got this experience, then you should be able to say to us, we know what we did wrong. It was a failure in our system, and we're immediately making these corrections. That's why you're having a difficult time with this group of members of Congress, because we saw it too. We've seen the things, but you are the 28-year expert. You are the person that, and only you, that can make the changes. And I hear you say, well, I've got to wait for a final report before at 28 years experience. That is why we think what you're doing, the answers you're giving us are not correct, and you are not using your professional expertise. Mr. Chairman, I will allow her to respond.
I am asking those same questions, sir. And I assure you, when I have a full and complete report of exactly what happened, there will be accountability and we will make changes.
But before I recognize the question, just out of curiosity, Director, it's been 9 days. Every American wants these questions answered. Do you have a ballpark estimate of when what Mr. Sessions asked you would be able to answer?
So I can tell
Time-wise?
I can tell you on our mission assurance internal investigation, we are targeting to have that completed within 60 days. There's also an external investigation that is going to be taking place. There are a number of Office of Inspector General investigations as well, and we are working in concert. And then, of course, there's the Department of Justice, FBI criminal investigation.
Chair recognizes Mr. Ocasio-Cortez from New York.
Thank you, Mr.
Let's
Chairman.
go.
Director Cheadle, respectfully,
what you had just laid out about 60 days. We are currently in the midst of an especially concentrated presidential campaign in the moment. That is also paired with, of course, elections happening across the country. They're happening in about 100 days. So the notion of a report coming out in 60 days when the threat environment is so high in the United States, irrespective of party, is not acceptable. And I think it's very important to understand that. This is not theater. This is not about jockeying. This is about the safety of some of the most highly targeted and valued targets internationally and domestically in the United States of America. So the idea that a report will be finalized in 60 days, let alone prior to any actionable decisions that would be made, is simply not acceptable. It has been 10 days since an assassination attempt on a former president of the United States, regardless of party. There need to be answers. Again, this committee, this is not a moment of theater. We have to make policy decisions, and we have to make them now. We do. And that may be and that may require legislation. That may require policy that we must pass in the immediate term. And without that, we are flying blind. So the lack of answers and the lack of report is just simply not something that we can accept here. Director Cheadle, is there a standard perimeter that the Secret Service establishes around an event, or are those perimeters independently determined per event and scenario?
There is no standard. Every event and every venue is different and treated as such.
So each event has a different perimeter that is established depending on the logistics of that event. Now, you established earlier that the building upon which the shooter operated from was outside of that established perimeter, correct, for the Butler, Pennsylvania event?
It was outside of our secure perimeter, yes.
Now, that building was, I believe, 500. How far away was that building from the president?
It was approximately 200 yards.
200 yards. Now,
Lie.
the individual used an AR-15 in order to act out his assassination attempt. An AR-15 has a range of about 400 to 600 yards. My question is, why does the Secret Service perimeter, why is the Secret Service protective perimeter shorter than one of the most popular semi-automatic weapons in the United States?
There are a number of weapons out there with a number of ranges. Again, an advance was completed. The determination of the perimeter, I'm not going to speak to specifics, but there are a number of factors that are taken into account when we determine our perimeter. Some of it has to do with terrain, some of it has to do with buildings, some of it has to do with assets and resources that are available.
And so what I'm hearing is that a perimeter was not established outdoors in an outdoor venue that would prevent an AR-15, which is one of the most common weapons used in mass shootings, from being able to be within the range of Secret Service protection.
A perimeter was established, and even though there were buildings that were outside of that perimeter, it wasn't just that building. There were a number of buildings in the area, and there was overwatch that was created to help mitigate some of those buildings.
Respectfully, Dr. Cheadle, as well, as a person who has experienced an enormous amount of threat incidents, including incidents that have never been reported publicly, there's a common pattern that happens here, whether it's Secret Service, FBI, Capitol Police, local departments. After a critical security failure, we often hear there will be an independent investigation. That independent investigation gets set up. Usually the expectation is between 2 to 3 months after the incident, and then nothing really occurs from there. The report is usually not satisfactory to the questions that are usually being raised here. And most importantly, corrective action is rarely taken. If I were to state anything that I think is profoundly important, is that we need to have answers to the public. Ideally, I would encourage you and the agency to be more forthright with the members that still have yet to have their questioning, because the public deserves to have full confidence, and the stakes are too high. The violence that could break out in this political moment, regardless of party, in the event of someone getting hurt, constitutes a national security threat to the entire country. Thank you, and I yield back.
Could I go back to something you
Yes,
said?
please. Feel free, Director.
Ma'am, if I could just speak to something you said at the outset when you started your questioning. I want to assure you and everyone on this committee that I'm not waiting for a report to take action. We have been conducting analysis all along, and we have been adding additional features to our security details since this incident occurred.
And I'd hope you can highlight and illuminate what some of those are in the event of other members questioning as well.
Very good. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Biggs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I request unanimous consent for that.